Welcome back, everybody. It's Ben from the Ben and Bev channel, and today we're going to be talking about Peacemaker's first season that James Gunn created for HBOMAX. Now, we can't really talk about Peacemaker without talking about The Suicide Squad. That was one of the more underrated movies that came out last year, in my opinion. It absolutely bombed at the box office. The movie had generally positive reviews from both audience and critics, but it came out at a bad time during the pandemic and didn't really get a huge box office return. While I understand the basic apprehension to want to see this movie since it is just a remake of The Suicide Squad, which came out really not that long ago and left really dissatisfied taste in a lot of people's mouths as the movie wasn't what it was built to be and didn't really live up to the expectations that DC was setting up for that part of the universe.
As you all know, they had to restructure everything after that.
When you put a director like James Gunn at the helm, amazing casting with some of the characters in that movie. As weird as the characters were, all the actors that played them really embodied the different emotions and feeling that James Gunn delivered to each of them. Whether it was Ratcatcher, Polka Dot Man, or even Stallone as King Shark. All the casting in that movie was phenomenal, and one of the bigger parts of that movie that really caught me off guard was John Cena as Peacemaker, an utterly atrocious asshole of a human being doing anything necessary without any thought or regard to if it's actually a good thing to do. When they announced that there was a spin-off in production for that character before the movie had even come out, I was a little nervous because I hadn't seen the film yet and I wasn't sure if John Cena would be able to carry a lead role. Even after seeing the movie, his parts in it were phenomenal and his acting was outstanding. He performed at 100%.
Or 1,000%.
Seriously, if you haven't seen it, go watch Suicide Squad right now. It was one of the better superhero movies that came out last year. In fact, the only movie that I gave a higher rating to that was a superhero movie was Shang-Chi.
The visual effects were outstanding, the cast was great, the comedy was great, and just the overall insanity that the R rating brought to it were something that you absolutely have to see.
And to make a whole spin-off show about him was something that I found to be an interesting concept and one that James Gunn himself admitted was a bit of a challenge to himself when he had a bit of free time during the pandemic. He felt there was more of this character's story to tell and a different dynamic of him that he could show besides just the one that we saw in Suicide Squad.
But enough of that movie.
Obviously, John Cena would be returning as the lead in the Peacemaker show, but joining him would be part of Amanda Waller's
agency that kind of controlled the Suicide Squad.
Mainly being Jennifer Holland's Harcourt and John Economos. There's also the introduction of another character named Vigilante, as well as Augie Smith. All of these characters that were added to Peacemaker's backstory at the beginning of the series are all very different and drastic dynamics, and each one of these characters has enough complexity to them that you really want to learn about them. You want to learn about Harcourt's past and why she acts the way she does, and though you don't learn a lot about it, you begin to learn more about her as a person. With John Economos, you learn more about him and what his interests are and how he's kind of the one who's bullied within the group. With the new addition of Murd and Adebayo, two very conflicting characters. While Murd was not in Suicide Squad, he's clearly an established force within the world, someone that they're almost fearful of to be leading them, and Adebayo is the new girl on the block who has a deep secreted connection to Amanda Waller that they do let you know on pretty early.
There's a couple appearances via phone call by Viola Davis.
Pretty early on in the series that explain her connection to her. I'm just trying not to give away too much since this is a spoiler-free review. The thing that really catches you off guard is the rudeness. It's Peacemaker's biggest and ugliest feature, and having him in the lead and
man, John Cena sells it.
Presentation of this conflicted, broken, but brash and abrasive with his dialogue character is relentless. He's just such a dick for the majority of this whole script. Blows your mind to even able to film these lines. Really delivers. He's a convincing asshole. The parody aspect of the show is also great. They have a lot of references to other characters in the DC universe. They throw some shade at some actors. He doesn't really care for Aquaman or any of the other big heroes. In every episode, he seems to have a different story about a different member of the Justice League. While overall, the show isn't connected to that, there is a pretty funny tease near the end of the season that definitely ties everything together and is like a perfect little on top of the cake. Also, in the first few episodes, you get introduced to Peacemaker's dad, Augie Smith,
played by the villain from Terminator 2,
who is this utterly atrocious white supremacist supervillain named the White Dragon, or at least he was before. Right now, he's just an angry old man in a house. As you learn more about Peacemaker's past, you realize this horrible upbringing he had from this man is why he is such a horrible representation of his own beliefs today. His backstory is very traumatic, and the more you learn about, feel that he actually is a good person at his core who's just really been led astray by the horrible monster of a father that he had previous. Robert Patrick does a phenomenal job playing that character, and he is honestly one of the most disgusting villains we've had in a superhero property so far. He's just brutally evil and over the top, cold and callous, and is just all about violence, filth, and being a racist scumbag. While none of these characters are really morally on the good side of things, the ones that are morally gray definitely have a lot more to bounce back against with the setup of character as atrocious as he is. And as the story rolls out, we also introduce a character named Vigilante. Yes, literally he's named Vigilante. The first time they mention it, the police in the background, and you think they're just talking about an armed vigilante, one of the many in this universe, but it's actually this guy. He's basically like a more morally corrupt version of Deadpool. He's Peacemaker's best friend, and the more you look at him, the more you're like, man, this guy might just just really be a serial killer. And throughout the season, I think he overall became my favorite because just the stuff he says was just so over the top, and the dialogue between him and Peacemaker and then him and the rest of the members of the Hit Squad
is absolutely outstanding.
You could literally go on about the character development and all the different cool characters for hours. I mean, Judo Master, Eagly, there's a whole bunch of ones I didn't even mention. James Gunn just does such a great job of tying in all of these characters and giving them a really fulfilling arc through this 8-episode season. I mean, this team is such a mess at the beginning. They're so different from one another, but they slowly come together. And by the end of it, you feel the connections are real. You feel for these people more than you do for the characters in other superhero movies. And I really mean that. The connection is human. The reality they live in the world they live in isn't too far from ours. And the protagonist for the show being another example of a James Gunn alien critter isn't even super cliche, because they make even these
butterflies
come off as conflicting characters, as some of the butterflies themselves are actually playing a big role.
Don't want to give away too big who is a butterfly and how that exactly goes down, because that is a pretty major spoiler and plot point for an emotional arc in the middle of the season, but
a lot of story dynamic for these aliens. While you spend the first half of the season not really talking about it and just trying to figure out what exactly it is they are and what it is they're doing, once you learn about them, you realize some of them aren't all bad and that they've been here for years. And seriously impeccable character work. Set pieces for the most part are phenomenal, and the special effects are pretty great too. There's only a couple scenes that are a little rough, but knowing James Gunn, those could be intentionally weird because there's some really odd camera angles in them. And the fight scenes are really good. The gritty realism mixed with the superhero bombastic graphic novel sense really brings a memory of something like The Boys or like a parody of The Watchmen. You really feel James Gunn thriving in his own zone, and just like I said in my Suicide Squad review, this is clearly the type of movies that he's supposed to be making. In fact, I would venture to say that this is even better than the peaks that Suicide Squad reached. I'm a huge Marvel guy, but when it comes to TV shows right now, I think this one might be my favorite when it comes to superheroes. It's laugh out loud funny at moments that it really shouldn't be, and there's also a sense of realism and depth whenever there is a serious character moment they have to deliver. They don't shy away from being completely serious at points of time before jumping back into the comical chaos that is Peacemaker. I mean, all of these characters for the most part are human unless they have some type of shield or armor or just heavy artillery with them. So some of these characters do get severely injured in this show, and they don't shy away from that. Peacemaker is honestly one of the best shows you can watch right now on streaming. I'm not exaggerating that at all. John Cena absolutely sells in the lead. The amazing supporting cast of characters, Vigilante to Murd to John Economos to even some of the aliens themselves. Everything is intricately woven.
The 80s hair metal soundtrack worship is also really funny. The intro scene where no one is smiling or emoting at all while they're dancing is great.
Full exploration of the different dynamics and the growth between these characters feels so personal. It's almost like you know them yourself. Something that I think a lot of the best shows end up accomplishing by the time you get to the end of their run. This show did in one season.
For a character who is the biggest asshole in a movie full of assholes.
Peacemaker and Adebayo have this really complex character dynamic where the two of them are completely opposite spectrums when it comes to who they are as people, both politically, physically, and in every way imaginable, but they somehow manage to see the good in each other and become friends. Seriously touching stuff within a morally corrupt group of people. James Gunn also once again showing his chops when it comes to animal critters. Eagly is great. I mean, I never thought I'd see an eagle hug a man and have it work 2 times in one episode. I almost shed a tear. Like, I mean, these are some touching moments between a man and an eagle.
Some seriously goofy shit.
I also love that this show didn't shy away from its TVMA rating. It gives you... Everything about this show is just constructed to be functioning on all cylinders. Everything is as over the top, overly violent, and overly funny, and overly ridiculous as it could be. It borders on being like
live action depiction of some type of Adult Swim action adventure show.
And I also really wanted to compliment the way they wrapped up the series. They had most of the plot lines tied up by the time you got to the final episode, and it was probably the most satisfying ending I've had in any superhero show for any season, minus
Daredevil Season 3 or Luke Cage Season 2.
None of these Disney Plus live action shows have had a finale that satisfied me as much as the finale to Peacemaker.
I'm not going to give away too much there.
There's some subtle nods to things in the DCU that are pretty funny, but overall, this show had the best first, second, and third act in its construction compared to any other superhero show I've seen. Phenomenal stuff. Absolutely outstanding. I can't wait to see more. My rating for Peacemaker is a 9.4 out of 10. I couldn't suggest this show more, and the only reason it probably doesn't have a perfect 10 out of 10 rating is I feel there's still more heights that this show could even go to. I feel like James Gunn is going to get to them within the next season or 2 of this show.
Or maybe even within that other spinoff.
Have you guys seen the best superhero show on television? Let us know what you thought about it in the comments below. We'll see you guys next time. Ben and Bev, out.